Stories are probably one of the most natural ways of communicating. We often use stories to tell information to people, tell stories, what happened last week, what happened 10 years ago. They're often used to share ideas or historical events. They can be real, called nonfiction, or created in your mind, stories like fiction. Sometimes we use short narrative sections, even in more professional writing. For example, for sharing, as I just said, examples. Autobiographies and biographies are other examples of nonfiction narratives. Stories are often shared orally, but written as well, which is why we're talking about them here. Because written stories usually don't include pictures, at least not many pictures, if any, then it's necessary to describe the situation clearly for the reader. Thus, you will have to use some of your descriptive writing skills from lesson 1 in this session. This means using strong verbs and clear and accurate adjectives. If a location is involved, then clear prepositions of place are necessary. So let's look at this picture here. We have 4 main parts that you'll find in a narrative. You have your introduction, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this in a minute. But in the introduction, you're going to have characters and talk about the background, the setting, conflict. They always have conflict. That's where you have obstacles to overcome in some way, small or big. Climax is kind of the final obstacle, as when you complete that and your goal is met. And then you have the resolution at the end. If you think back about movies that you've seen, you'll notice that you've often seen this general format in those narratives. Have you ever read a book or watched a movie about someone who had to work really hard to get ahead or to catch up? Maybe there were so many adversaries before they could reach their goal. Often I think of sports movies or those where someone was born with a disadvantage but is able to do more than most people accomplish who don't have that disadvantage. I really enjoy those kinds of stories. Note that the climax is when the final and often the largest goal is achieved. This might be winning a competition, or it might be graduating from college, or becoming the president. In the introduction, we have the hook. The hook is where we think about in fishing. You throw out a rod and reel, and it has a string, and at the end there is a hook. It grabs the fish. This is the thing that really gets people willing to read more of your writing. If you're writing a book, it'd be that quick, brief paragraph in the just inside the book cover, on the dust jackets. But it's a sentence, and we'll talk a bit more about some examples of this, but the thing that draws people to read more. And then you definitely want to include the setting, when, where, the characters, who's involved. The body, again, notice we have a similar format here: introduction, body, conclusion. The body will be organized chronologically, which means according to time as it happened. Although in more advanced writing, you'll have how they hint at the future or they reflect back on the past. But for example, you'll have suspense. You'll add suspense to it. You want people to be concerned about a character or to wonder what's going to happen next or have some doubts. Tension grows. Obstacles become more clear and you overcome these obstacles, slowly overcoming them. And then the climax is when you pass the last obstacle and the goal is achieved. The conclusion often has a resolution in it. Let's look more at this special content, the hook. Something really interesting, like surprising information that readers will see and immediately want to know more. There's also if you have any, in your introduction, you want to include any unique terminology. For example, if you're going to be talking about a festival or a concert, you need to describe that a little more. Maybe some foods or sports. You don't have to explain everything, but if understanding this is really essential to understand your story, then you need to explain it. Character description. Talk about the appearance, personality, job, relationship to other characters. Conflict. This will vary a lot, but the greater the conflict, the more interesting the climax and the resolution is. You'll find that your writing tends to focus either a lot on the conflict, a lot on the climax, or a lot on the resolution. You don't tend to focus a lot of your writing on the introduction and not leave enough time for the piece at the end, but you need to have all 4 parts in order to be a good narrative. There's also some special grammar that you'll find in narratives that you don't tend to see in other writing, unless you're writing academic writing where you do paraphrases and quoting. It's very similar here. So if you want to include the exact spoken words in your narrative, then you will need to use special quoting grammar. For example, John yelled, "Run." In this situation, we have a comma after the verb, and then you have two sets of quotation marks, and then you have the punctuation there at the end, in this case, exclamation point. The more common one would be said. Sarah said, comma, "I'll see you tomorrow," period, end of quotation marks. This is really important to have that punctuation there, just like this. Now, it's also possible that if you want to indicate what someone said without using the exact words, if you reflect back, you'll find that people do this quite often. So John yelled for me to run. In this case, I didn't use that, but here you'll find the more common use of that. Sarah said that she would see me tomorrow. Now compare this to the first one, where Sarah said, "I'll see you tomorrow," versus this one, Sarah said that she would see me tomorrow. It's the same thing, but in the first one, you know exactly what she said. "I'll see you tomorrow." And the second one, maybe she said, "I'll see you Tuesday," and that just happens to be tomorrow. I mean, we don't know the exact wording. So if the exact wording is important, you might, and it's also a little easier to include just exact wording instead of translating it yourself. But this is really common to use quotation marks in narratives. There's also some special vocabulary that we tend to use a lot in chronologically organized writing, as well as writing that focuses on time. So for example, we have first, second, third, fourth, fifth, like that, or first. You can swap next for any of these. I went first, second, next, fourth, last. Notice it is not firstly or secondly. You can say lastly, though. Last can have an ly on it. We do not put it on the firstly or secondly. Notice I've also put these in red, these commas underneath each one of them. This is really important. After each of these words, you're going to have a comma. First, comma, he went to the store. Next, comma, he bought the eggs. Last, comma, he went home and cooked. Very simple sentence, but you get the idea. And then we have after and before. You get two ways of using after and before. The example I've given here, it's as a prepositional phrase, after the party or before the party, comma, he took a nap. The other way of using it would be as kind of like I used because earlier, and when I was giving my examples. In the last session, talking about cause and effect, we used because and since. I showed you how to use them in beginning or middle of a sentence. So for example, after I went to the party, comma, I called my mother, period. Or I called my mother after I went to the party. In that case, there's no comma. So you can use it in the same way. Now this section is a little bit confusing here. At 3 o'clock, comma, he went to the party. On Tuesday, he went to the party. On Monday the 3rd, he went to the comma. Not Monday the 3rd, sorry. On January 1st, he went to the party. On the first day of January, he went to the party. Okay, these are all on. And then you have in. This is just for a month only. In January, comma, he studied really hard for his test. In 2015, he learned to drive, somewhere in that time period. So you have at, on, and in, with time and days, and these are very different. I suggest reading up on that yourself. Now let's look at the practice. And again, this would be something like I would do if you were turning in a paper like this. I'll be reading over it like this and discussing the paragraph according to these parts, such as organization and content, vocabulary, and grammar. Because this is a short paragraph, I chose only to focus on a one character story. And I suggest you do the same for your homework. Okay, now the introduction, I have my hook sentence. And it's maybe not the most exciting thing in the world, but I mentioned that there's a boy who wants to be a famous runner, but his mother tells him that he will have trouble walking. So we have this question here between how you can be a famous runner if you can't really walk well. I'm hoping to create some mystery there. And then I tell a little bit about the background. He was born with one leg shorter. And I don't use a lot of first and second in this case, but I think you can follow with the time pretty well. So let's read through this one together. My colors here. Bob Nelson wanted to be a famous runner, but his doctor told his mother that he would have trouble walking. This is because he was born with one leg shorter than the other. Because of his short leg, he didn't walk without help until he was 6. However, Bob was determined to be a runner. Every day, he tried to run in his yard. He fell many times and looked like he had been in a fight. He bruised his legs, arms, and face, but he always said, "I will not quit." One day at school, when he was 14, he tried out for the race team, but he was not accepted. However, he heard that anyone could run on the cross-country team, so he joined them. The other students laughed at him, and the coach told his mother that he shouldn't run, but Bob insisted on trying. He practiced every day before the first race. On the day of the race, it was raining, and the track was up an old bumpy mountain road. Bob ran as hard as he could, and he didn't look backwards. When he got to the end, he didn't see anyone. He was sure that he was last, but when he crossed the finish line, everyone cheered. The other runners had a lot of trouble running up the bumpy and slippery mountain track, but for Bob, the ground always felt bumpy. Although he didn't win many races after the first, he still won some, and because he never quit, he became a strong cross-country runner. Happy ending, I know. Now, I actually wrote this, but I used some ideas that I've heard from other stories. This is not a true story, to my knowledge. I don't know anybody named Bob Nelson. Let's talk a little bit about this. Let's identify the parts to it. We have in the very beginning, you have the introduction, so I introduced Bob. Bob is a boy that since he was a child, you understand that he, one leg is shorter than the other, he has trouble walking, but yet he always wants to be a runner. So this is this character, you get an idea of his personality. He's very stubborn and determined. And then you have the conflicts. The conflicts are that every time he tries to run, he falls down. I talk about how he bruises his legs, arms, and face. And when he was at school, he tried out for the race team, but he was not accepted. So there's many obstacles. Or before that, I even talked about trying to run in his yard, that he was slow. I guess in the introduction, you would understand that he was slow to learn to walk until he was 6. That'd be an introduction piece. But he fell many times, and he looked like he'd been in a fight, but he kept getting back up. Notice the use of the quote here. I could have said that, but he said that he won't quit. But I think that in this case, adding the phrase "I will not quit" is very. It draws attention to Bob and to his personality, and I thought it was more useful than just translating it with a that. Okay, so we have the conflicts. Many times he's trying, and even then, once he gets on the team, he crosses. Getting onto the team and able to run with the other students and the practice is an accomplishment, but it's not enough. But you'll see here that he practiced every day. Oh yeah, students laughed at him. That's a conflict. The coach told his mother he shouldn't run. That's a conflict, but he got over that. He insisted on trying. So we have little bumps going up. He's continuing to try, not giving up. He practiced every day. And then we have the day of the race. This is kind of the big finale in this case. So let's look at this. On the day of the race, it was raining and the track. We have a setting here talking about how he was able to accomplish it. That's my setting. He ran as hard as he could and as fast as he could, and he didn't look backwards. Very important. He got to the end. He didn't see anyone. And we had the climax. Everybody cheered when he crossed the line. This is the big moment in my very, very short story. And then after that, you kind of go downhill and you see kind of the resolution. You see it explained. How did he win? And he talks about, and then it has a little bit about his future here. What's going to happen in his future? He's still going to win, still going to have problems, but that's the climax. And then let's go back and look at a few transition words or keywords that I used. I mentioned before about using because. We did that in the last session as well. We have however. That was we talked about it. That even I think 2 or 3 videos back. about in the compare and contrast section for contrast. And I use obviously the conjunctions, when, and then we have when, but, and then I have again, however, for contrast. So, and then I mentioned already, we use the quotation marks, and then we see when again. So I use when a lot to indicate what happens when this happens and something else happens. And so read over that and get some ideas for your homework. I hope again that you will focus on just one character. And I also want to point out this is written in the past tense. So nearly every sentence is past tense. So let's look at your work. Note that this is the last lesson on essay types for this session this month. I hope you'll join us next session as we hope to add some more material, and you may want to take this one again as it's an opportunity to further expand and develop and improve your writing. Good luck.